Hello and welcome. My name is Victoria and I'm an international trade and customs consultant. On this channel, I explore topics related to international trade and movement of goods across borders. Today, I want to talk about a somewhat technical topic, which probably is one of the most boring topics in international trade and customs, but nonetheless, it has the potential to either make your business extremely compliant and bulletproof, or it has the capacity to bankrupt it if wrong classification takes place. Customs classification is the foundational element of international trade compliance. The framework for this system is the Harmonized Commodity Description and Coding System, more commonly referred to as the Harmonized System, developed and maintained by the World Customs Organization. For the most part, each country on Earth adopts these codes at least 6 digits, adding onto them based on their national nomenclatures. Classification can go from 8 to 12 digits, and so it very much depends on the country with which you're dealing with. These codes are easily searchable. In UK, for example, you can Google UK tariff and you will have access to the list of goods based on either the description of the goods or the actual digits. The EU Combined Nomenclature is similar, though I do prefer to search the UK website. If I'm honest, EU website is called TARIC with a C at the end. In the same manner, most other countries in the world have these lists available, especially with the digitalization. All of this information tends to be placed online. If, however, you find it difficult to access this information, it should be available through the World Customs Organization website or, as an alternative, World Trade Organization. The harmonized system follows a logical progression from the general to the specific, beginning with broad economic or material-based sectors. These initial groupings, known as sections, are not arbitrary. They reflect the fundamental nature of the goods. The entire nomenclature is divided into 21 sections, which group together goods from related industries. For example, Section 11 refers to textiles and textile articles, and it broadly covers the entire textile industry. These sections are then subdivided into 99 chapters where the first 2 digits of the code are assigned. For instance, within the textile section, chapter 50 is dedicated to silk, while chapter 61 covers articles of apparel and clothing accessories, knitted or crocheted. This division ensures that all silk-based goods fall exclusively under Chapter 50, and all knitted garments fall under Chapter 61. Within each chapter, the code expands to 4 digits to form a heading, such as 6103, for example, for men's suits, ensembles, jackets, knitted, etc. And finally to 6 digits for the subheading, which is, for example, 610322 for men's ensembles of cotton. The assigned code directly determines the applicable duty rates and any associated taxes for the shipment. It dictates whether a product is subject to specific import or export restrictions, licensing requirements, or prohibitions. Furthermore, the code is used to verify eligibility for preferential tariff treatment under any applicable trade agreement. Note that classification is more complex than one might think, and there are often disputes related to classification because the local customs authorities often disagree with the classification that is performed either by the supplier, the manufacturer, the importer, and they might impose a repayment of duties that they consider underpaid. A penalty might also be applicable if they consider that this was done knowingly and on purpose. In my practice, I tend to say that classification is a very ambiguous exercise because the rules, while defined, can be up to interpretation. There is, of course, a list of general rules to follow, and there are specific chapter notes within the combined nomenclature. And other guides also exist to help a business with the classification. There are also official historic classifications called binding tariff information. In UK, it's called binding tariff information decision or binding tariff decision that can serve as a reference. But these are not legally binding to other businesses, and they have also temporary limitations. So, for example, if your business applies for a binding tariff information, that binding decision will only be relevant to your particular business, even though those decisions can be found online and can serve as a reference for a classification that has been done specifically by the local authorities. And in case you ever enter in litigation, which has been the case with some of my clients, I have often used the binding tariff information as the basis for our argument, to basically demonstrate that if the business I work with has chosen a specific commodity code to classify under a similar binding tariff information, then customs authorities have grounds to accept it. The actual sets of codes range from 6,000 to 10,000 codes, depending on the country, and so it is important to ensure that this is done right. In my practice, I've seen businesses go bankrupt because they were audited by the customs authorities that imposed a huge bill because they were not agreeing with the classification that the business has chosen. The business itself was not expecting such a bill, and conversely, I have seen businesses that successfully argued against the claims that their classification was wrong, and so they were essentially able to maintain that customs classification. Each case is a separate case, and the business may or may not have funds to hire someone like myself to accompany them in the litigation process and formulate an argument in their defense. Again, these processes also tend to last for quite some time because you have the initial process of the audit, which might take months, and will be based on the requested data from the business. Customs authorities can request specific details related to the characteristics of the goods that you are importing as a business. Then they will proceed with the analysis. Then there are different back and forths where they can ask you some extra questions. They can ask you whether you disagree with their decision about your classification, etc., etc. So this process overall can last years sometimes. But in basic terms, these are the most important points about classification. But of course, there are many more technical components to it. For example, you should not rely entirely on your suppliers or manufacturer's classification. You as a business should always conduct your own classification, at least do some research just to ensure that the classification that your supplier/manufacturer provided you with seems to be consistent with the general information that you could potentially find online or in different forums. So this would be something to give you a certain sense of certainty, because I have seen suppliers classify the goods under the wrong commodity codes to later say that it was not their responsibility in the first place, which indeed many times it is not. And so the liability falls on the importer of the goods. If you have any questions related to classification, please do not hesitate to contact me, and I will be very happy to help you. All of the relevant details are below the video. Thank you, and see you next time.